Joe Sharp is going to be evaluated today by team number 1, which consists of myself, Caroline, and Betsy. And our task is to evaluate Joe on 3 primary chapters in the evaluation of the persuasive speaker. One is on vision, and Dan will be speaking to us today specifically on vision. Content, use of stories, anecdotes, and gestures, which will be Caroline. And then finally, I will be speaking on presentation and whether or not his story was convincing to you. So let's start with, we're starting with 1, that's vision, that would be Dan. I think we're out of sync, that's okay.
Yes,
I do.
I want my thoughts in order. I was inspired listening to Joe's vision. Very often in my life, I have all these ideas in mind, but no proactiveness in planning. Joe addressed the need to emphasize our joys in life versus the challenges we have at facing things that really touch our heart in a way that freezes our mind, like death, for instance. He emphasized the importance of the great things that have happened in life and focused on creativity and proactivity and planning now for the future and how it can produce great results rather than a sadness and confusion. I liked how Joe just made things crystal clear of how he talked about all kinds of possessions and how it can just be confusing as to what to do first. It was an excellent example Joe gave of the farmer who had a reverse birthday party. I can't imagine how somebody can get so creative and so thoughtful to get people together and make it a happy occurrence to plan for something as complex as death. In terms of improvement, I feel Joe could move his whole body and at some times space different areas in the room. I also feel that I heard somewhat of a constant speed of how he produced his thoughts. I feel it would be good to put a little bit more emotion in, get people to take time to think. And I think he, at the end of the presentation, made it crystal clear by a summarization as to how we could embed these thoughts in our life. Thank you.
Joe, I want to tell you how much I appreciate this particular speech because it's something that I've been working on personally. I have already, in my Bible, I have my funeral all laid out. It's actually not a funeral, it's going to be a celebration. But to that end, I am going to be talking to you a little bit more about the content with the use of stories and anecdotes and gestures and dramatization. One of the things that I noticed is that your opening was a little meandering, so I'd like to see that tightened up a little bit and succinctly talk a little bit more about, at the beginning, and maybe dramatize a little more about how it felt to walk into that apartment and not know what to do with your wife's things. It was a very touching story, and you gave us some imagery that helped us visualize who she was a little bit, an artist, a good thinker, somebody who could get books written, and she must have been a vibrant personality, I imagine, if she had jewelry and other kinds of clothes that you felt needed to find a new home. I loved that. It was touching, and it was a valuable lesson as a way to introduce the topic, I believe, and how to handle our final chapter. And I like the way you set it up, in that you were going to talk about people who could make it better, and you gave us examples of the farmer. I like this particular topic because it was a very creative way of approaching this idea. I don't have a lot of valuables like that, you know, trinkets or collections, because I'm not a collector. But I can see where somebody who had a lot of collections might want to do something like this. And so for a TED Talk, I believe that this would be an excellent example. You gave great, the story, that was probably your biggest story in the whole speech. I'd like to see more about and hear more about the personal assistant approach. However, I think that this would be something that I've seen put into practice, and it is a great way of helping the family stay out of having to deal with those sentimental parts of a person's death. And then yourself, you talked about ourselves, using ourselves as the person who organized our life and death better, only if we can know ourselves better. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, I guess. Your emphasis on the end, and I'd like to hear that a little more emphasized, is to plan, to start right now. I believe that there's a consensus here amongst us that we would all agree to that particular plan, Joe, and I thank you for bringing this topic up, and I look forward to hearing it on TED.
So am I.
Joe, I've been asked to speak on your presentation whether or not your message convinced us to take action. And the fact that you started out with such a beloved story, I was down on my knees already going, whatever you want, Joe. I'm there with you. I think that 6 to 8 minutes on a topic, and I'm sure that there was some framework here that limited you to that, is a big challenge for such an enormous topic. This is somebody's life, all of our lives that we're talking about in general. And so to bring all that information, all that framework together, and then convince somebody of one specific thing is an enormous undertaking. I think you handled it. I would encourage you to, at any opportunity, lengthen your speech when you actually give this speech again prior to TED. Some of the things I like about your speech, your love, your emotion, the fact that this is something that you want all of us to benefit from, and I think that that's a very selfless thing. The topic is vital to everybody. This isn't something that anybody in the room doesn't have a strong need to know. And your quote, "Don't leave things like we did, idle without knowing what to do." The fact that you learned something and you wanted to share that knowledge with others. I'm left torn a little bit because I see the tangible side of your story and the intangible side of your story. The tangible side of your story is the mementos, the relics, the precious gifts and treasures that the person leaves behind, and who and how to deal with those items. But then when you described your wife, you talked about the things, the life that she brought into those things. That to me was metaphorical. I would like a little more clarity as to which part of the story you want us to take home with us. Is it the metaphor, the fact that you have to live this life in order to make those mementos meaningful? Or is it the technical side of actually sharing and how to delegate and allocate those items for posterity. So that would be helpful. The other thing that I would like to learn from you is, since this is such a big topic, since it is something that we should begin now, what exactly, although it might be a simple task, what can I take home? What one thing can I take home perhaps to do that could get me started? But I love the topic. I think that you had a wonderful way of presenting it. I think it's something we all need to consider and benefit from, and I certainly hope to hear more from you, Joe. I look forward to hearing you on broadcast.
I think each of you has placed the difficulty of covering this topic well, very clearly. And I have to ask some further questions later about that. It is something I care a lot about and want to do effectively, but it's challenging, and I'm not quite sure I even know how to do it yet. But I'm going to make a very serious effort to do it, and I thank each of you for the help you've given me.
Can we roll this out to the audience?
Looking at the screens behind you, it appears that Joe's name is first on the agenda for his presentation on this network.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Linda. Joe, thank you for being inclusive with us with your personal stories and the other stories that you share. It's a great way to bring the audience in. If you plan to give this speech in the future to a live audience, please remember to include the audience in your stance. If you remember, you ended up standing between Caroline and me, probably to make sure most of the people could hear you, but I didn't see you look at Bonnie or me. I didn't see you look at Mary or Caroline. So you want to be sure your field of vision includes your whole physical audience if you give this before a live audience. Thank you.
Yeah, my comment was, I personally love the topic. I'm not planning on dying soon, but I could relate to the topic because I've been downsizing. And I would think anyone, as we get older and we move into some other place or we change where we're living, there's a lot of things that might be precious to us, and how do we get rid of them, or how do we deal with it? And I think she might even be able to expand your audience.
I'm going to have to take a lottery here. Caroline, I noticed your hand go up first.
What did you call it?
Carol, I'm sorry.
One thing that struck me was, since you're thinking about presenting on video, I noticed a lot of the gestures are up near your head, and I think that it would work better to have them further from your head if you're just being seen on the video. Because the hand up, I was just curious.